Yeah, I'm glad that I have this opportunity again to speak with you. The theme for our conference here is followers of Christ, right? What that means to be a follower of Christ. And Jesus is the one that we look to see what that meant, what it means to be a Christian, a disciple, follower of Christ. And I'm not going into details of yesterday, but again, it means that, does anyone remember the first one? What it means to be a follower of Christ? Oh yeah. Jesus, if we're going to follow him, it means that whoever we love most right now in our hearts, that has to change. That has to become Jesus. Doesn't mean you stop loving that person. Okay? You still love. But Jesus is your greatest love. Right? That's a follower of Christ. I love my wife dearly. Maybe I'll have time to share a little bit just what God's been doing in my marriage, not with my wife, but I love my wife more than anything here in this world. But compared to God, I love God even more. But that doesn't mean I don't love my wife. I'll do anything for my wife. But my love for God is that much greater. And that's what has to happen to be a follower of Christ. And then does anyone remember the second one? The second point of being a follower of Christ?
Carry your cross?
Yeah, you gotta carry your cross. That means we die. It's not about us anymore. It's about Jesus. That's what it means to be a follower of Christ. And then the last one, the third one, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ? It means that we give up everything for him. All our possessions. This is what Jesus said. And how do we do all this? It's because we see that Jesus is worth it. Nothing compares to him. So we don't just do this because we're told to, because no one is just going to give up everything for somebody. We only do that because he truly is worth it. And we gladly, because nothing compares, and we're able to do that. So that's what a follower of Christ is. Now today, continuing on what it means to be a follower of Christ, I wanted to talk to you about this one topic, which I believe is actually really important, because it's going to lead you to making some really important decisions in your life. It has to do with dating and marriage. And I think this is a part that we need to address in the church. And it's such a big topic, so it's going to be difficult to cover everything. And I don't even know if that's possible in one setting. But I'm just going to address just a few points, what I think is important about relationships. Now, some of you are maybe young and this might not apply. Maybe you're not thinking about marriage at this point. But based on statistics, most of you are going to get married at one point. And it's important for us to understand what marriage is, what to look for in a spouse, and what really is important. How do we do this in a biblical context? And then even about dating. What is that all about? Is that even biblical? Well, actually in the Bible, there's no mention about dating. But this is something we see all throughout society, everywhere, whether you're in church or not. We see people dating. So is that biblical? Is that what we're supposed to do, the way we look at dating in the world? So before we begin, I wanted to ask you guys, maybe today is going to be more, hopefully, interactive. It's not just a sermon that I'm going to preach. Maybe I can ask you questions in between, and then you guys can give me some feedback. We can kind of talk to each other here tonight. And then if you have any questions, please save it, because at the end, I'd love to have some Q&A, on anything that we addressed here today. Or maybe it wasn't addressed here today, but on that topic. And if you have it, then you can ask those questions at the end. But right now, can you try to think of a marriage that you've seen? It doesn't necessarily have to be your parents, right? But just a marriage that you have seen that you respect. that you admire? And when you think about that marriage, you're like, wow, like they have a really good marriage. So what about that marriage do you admire? And please don't, if you decide to share, like, don't tell me who it is or what their names are. Like, you don't have to share that. Just what you saw about that marriage that you admire. Does anyone have anything that comes to mind? Yeah, I know a good marriage. Okay. So can you tell me what characteristic, attribute about that marriage?
So one thing that I think that I saw different from a lot of marriages is they put each other first, even above their children. And the reasoning was like, in like 10 years you guys are gonna move out and we're still gonna be here. So yeah. Because I feel like a lot of people, they like wait till their kids are gone and then they'll like get a divorce or something.
Yeah, that's true too. Because of their kids, they stay married.
Yeah.
In the Bible, husband is one with wife. Husband is not one with their kids. Right? The wife is not one with their kids. Wife is one with husband. This is the most unique relationship that we have. There was something I was going to say. Well, keep saying that again. Like there was something that I was going to share, but then I forgot right now. Wait, you said it was okay. I remember. It reminded me of this one. I was at this conference. It wasn't a marriage conference. It was. I went to this conference and this. I'm waiting for the pastor to come out and speak, but his wife actually came out first. And the wife was the one that was going to introduce her husband, at the conference. And she just started talking about her husband. And she said, all of you, of course, you know my husband, because he's God's just using him in a global way, right? So, and especially we're all there because we all know so much about this man, godly man. And he said, and this is what she said. This is a marriage that I really admire. But she said, you guys all know him. What I can tell you right now is that the way you see him at church, in ministry, the way you see him act, the way he is, he's exactly the same at home. There's no difference. He's exactly like that at home. And I remember I heard the wife say that, and I was like, wow, is that even possible? Really? He's the same at home and in public? Because I wasn't like that. In public, in church, it's like, oh, that's the pastor, the holy pastor, Pastor Dewey, right? But at home, many times there was difference. Right? And my wife would say, no one knows this except for me. I'm like, you're right. I'm not that good of a person. My wife's the one that sees the true side. And I remember when the wife, that speaker's wife said that, and then the husband, now I'm going to welcome my husband. And then the husband came out, and it's like he's holding her hand, and he's like, isn't she so beautiful? This is my wife. Then he kisses her on the cheek, and I'm like, this is so incredible. This is what I want, in marriage. That's what I admire. How about you? Anyone else about marriage that they admire? Right?
Yeah. So they each are different as individuals, but they kind of move together.
Really incredible, right? They support each other. There are things that the wife has that the husband doesn't, and they complement each other. It's not really about man being head, as in I'm going to have authority, and you listen to what I have to say because I am the husband and you're the wife. No, it's not like that. We have to look at the whole Bible. And the Bible says, husbands, you are to love your wives like Christ loved the church. You know how much Christ loved the church? He died for the church. And that's what God is saying. This is my picture of husbands. You are to love your wives to the point you will die for them. Yeah, they complement each other. It's not just one over the other who has more power or anything. That's not. Good. I think Christine, you raised your hand. What was it you wanted to share?
Like, they help each other, like, walk through faith. And
Yeah.
they move together in faith.
Yeah. So many times, even like my wife, she supports me in incredible ways. Like little things that she says, statements of faith that really lifts me up. And we help each other, support each other that way too. It's wonderful. Anyone else? Marriage? Well, how about this? How about a marriage that you've seen that you don't want to model? Like you're like, oh, if I get married, I don't want my marriage to be like that. And again, don't name names. Okay? We don't need to go into details like that. But what was it about that marriage that you saw and you're like, yeah, that's not good?
They only stay together for the kids.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, right? Because God had this plan for marriage, but when hurt, broken people get married together, there's difficulty. Yeah, there is. Yeah. It wasn't always meant to be that way, but it happens. Okay. Anyone else?
They don't talk or communicate.
Yeah, it's hard. And then it's hard even for the children to see that too. Okay, so I think all of us, we want to have good marriages when we get married. Right? Who's ever going to say like, oh, you know, my marriage is going to be bad? Like no one thinks that way. You know, we all want to have really good marriages. Now, how is that going to happen? Like that's what we're trying to discuss here, so that you guys can make really wise decisions when that time comes. Okay? So today, just to begin, I want to just talk about this issue, this topic of dating, because ultimately, people start dating. They're not really thinking about marriage, but they're dating. And it's such a common thing. It's like almost like it's part of our culture here, our society here. That's what young people do. They meet somebody and they start dating. But the thing is, just even this concept, this hasn't even been around that long, dating, the way we see it. Like even one generation, even about 70 years ago, okay, so it's probably like when our grandparents were born, just that generation, well, 2 generations from you, right? But in those 2 generations, even back then, this was a foreign concept to them, dating. Like back in, like, let's say even like 1950s, like if you were to go back in time to 1950 and talk about dating, they have no idea what you're talking about. Right? This is a recent thing that's been going on, this whole concept of dating. So, just so that we're on the same page, let me define what I mean by dating. Dating is entering into a relationship that encourages emotional attachment with each other without having the protections of a fence called covenant. That's what I mean by dating. You're entering into a relationship, right? So a guy and girl, they're entering into this relationship, and it's promoting an attachment with each other, an emotional attachment, but there is no fence to protect. Right? And that fence is what we call covenant, and I'm going to explain that a little further. Okay? So let's say you're a young man or a young woman, or whatever their age is. You know, they start to date, okay? And they start to become emotionally attached. Even after a few times of dating, it's very easy for them to drift into this area called the zone of vulnerability. Okay, you enter into that zone. And what that means is that now that you've dated to a certain point, and you've been emotionally attached now, for this relationship to end, there's no way you can walk away from it without getting hurt. Right? Now you're vulnerable now. Okay, you've crossed into that. So when you do break up, if that happens, then you remain hurt. A lot of people, they're crushed and devastated when this happens. So once the people are in that zone, once they cross into that zone, you know, you're vulnerable. That's that zone of vulnerability. So that emotional attachment is what's making you vulnerable. But then on top of that, I'm not saying every relationship out there is like this, but many times it is. And what happens is when you have two people who are attracted to each other, in due time, what happens is this leads into a sexual relationship. So now there's an added attachment that's occurred here in this relationship. Not only are you attached emotionally, but now you are attached sexually. Now if you were to break up, this is really damaging. Like it hurts. It crushes you. Like it's almost like if you've been in a relationship that way, where you're emotionally attached and you're sexually attached and you break up. That's like a divorce without you actually going through a marriage. Right? That's how much it hurts if you were to break up that way. So a married couple, if we think of going back to what a married couple is, a married couple in God's design are the only ones that are allowed, permitted to enter into that zone of vulnerability. Okay, God is saying you make yourself vulnerable so that you attach yourself with that person emotionally, you attach yourself with that person sexually, and it's okay. Because there's a fence that protects you. And that fence is called a covenant. That's what marriage is. Because the way God designed it, right, this is God's design, not that it's being lived out perfectly in the world today, but in God's plan and design, what a covenant is that once you enter into that covenant, you never leave. Okay, you don't leave. No matter how hard it gets, you don't leave. That's what a covenant is. And that's what a marriage is. So, if you now make yourself vulnerable, the only way you're going to get hurt, like crushed, is if that person leaves, breaks up. And that's why God says the only place where you can be emotionally attached with somebody and then sexually attached to somebody is only in that protection of a covenant. Because you're not supposed to leave. Okay? That's the only time you're vulnerable. And that's why a husband and wife, they open themselves up and they're vulnerable in every aspect of their lives. And they could feel safe that way because they have that covenant. But when you do this when you're dating, without being married, without being in that covenant, and you're dating like how we see dating in today's society, they're emotionally attached, and at times they even get to be sexually attached without having that covenant, and it's just devastating because many times they break up. And how could you not be hurt after that? Your heart breaks. And it wasn't supposed to be that way. It was only in the place of marriage when you are to open yourself and make yourself vulnerable to that point. Only in marriage. It's never at dating. Now, I've been working with youth as a teacher and a pastor for almost 18 years now. And during that time, I've had my share of students that dated. Dated like, the way I describe what dating is. And then I saw them break up. And they were so hurt. And even myself, seeing them, it hurt me, what they were going through. And a lot of times these students, they dated and they weren't thinking of marriage. They're not thinking that far ahead. They're just thinking of, I want to have a boyfriend. I want to have a girlfriend. And then they break up. One of the persons, I met somebody else. I'm interested in somebody else. And then they would break up and they're just crushed. So I made it a point during my time, I'm going to teach the students that, until you're old enough to be thinking about marriage, you shouldn't really even be getting into any relationship with anyone, which is even dating. And that's what I taught. Then one day, one of my students, he came to me. He was a junior in high school. He came up to me and he said, Pastor Dewey, can I talk to you after service today? And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. Where do you want to talk? And he's like, well, is it like something we need to talk just the two of us? And he's like, yeah. All right, so how about we meet outside near the parking lot? And he said, okay. So after service, I told him I would meet with him there, and I went. And I see him standing there, and there was this girl, one of the girls in our youth group, and she's a senior. Okay, so she's a senior, he's a junior, and I see them standing in the parking lot. So I walk up, and I had no idea, right? I had zero clue, right? I went over because the guy wanted to talk to me, so I'm just thinking, well, I need to politely ask her to leave so I can talk to him. And then all of a sudden, like, he starts talking to me, and he's like, yeah, we wanted to talk to you. And then it hit me. Like, I understood what's going on right now. And what happened is these two, they developed feelings for each other. They actually became emotionally attached already. And then, they were telling me that, they're thinking, they want to get into a relationship because they're thinking about marriage. Right? So I'm like, okay, so you're 17 and she's 18. And you're telling me, as a 17-year-old, you're serious and talking about marriage, because this is what I've been teaching, right? So he knew how to, like, approach this. He's like, I want to marry this girl, like, you're a junior in high school, you still take the school bus, like, how are you going to tell a target, like, are you, like, but, I didn't say this is all what I'm thinking, so I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So this is what I told him. I told him, what I'm going to tell you is what I would tell my own son, my own daughter, if this is the same situation. And I told him that, well, the girl, you're going to graduate soon, and you're going to go to college. And when you go there, you're going to meet a lot of new people. All right? Right now, you've just been in this little place. This is all you know. Now you're going to go out, and you're going to meet more people. And there's going to be a lot of people there. Right? And why don't you just go first? Don't start a relationship. Don't even commit and say, like, I'm going to save myself for marriage for her. Why don't you go? All right? Make friends there. Just go and see the world, right? And in college. And then you have another year of high school, and then you're going to go away to college. So you're going to also go to a different college and meet people and things, right? So this is what I would tell you. Wait 2 years. At least 2 years. For her to go 1 year in college, for him, wait until he goes 1 year in college. And if you are still serious about each other, that you guys can wait for each other, because love waits. Okay? Love is not impatient. And if you're willing to wait, just like Jacob, remember he waited 7 years to marry Rachel. The Bible said it felt only like a few days, those 7 years. Because he truly loved Rachel. He waited. Then he had to work another 7 years, like after that. But again, that's genuine love. He knows how to wait. So that's what I told them. So they said, okay, but then what do we do now? What do we do with each other now for the 2 years? And I told them, and I knew this was going to be really hard, because they already crossed into that zone of vulnerability. They were already emotionally attached. But I told them, see, if you don't break that, then you guys are officially not boyfriend and girlfriend, but you guys are doing everything else. That you guys are still boyfriend and girlfriend. So what I told them was, it doesn't mean you have to stop being friends. It doesn't mean that, but you guys are, what are you doing? You're talking to each other like 24/7, and you're spending time together 24/7. Don't do that anymore. It doesn't mean you ignore each other at church and stuff, but don't talk to each other like that. You're not boyfriend and girlfriend. You're not in that relationship. And they kind of like sighed, and they said, okay. And they left. They went home. They told their parents what I said, that they should wait 2 years. And parents on both sides, they actually wanted them to be in a relationship. They thought like, and they heard the son parents, the son told them, like, I want to marry her. I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. And they're both good Christians too. That's why parents were like blessing, they were happy, but then they heard that I told them like wait 2 years. So they were kind of like, oh wow, that's a long time. Okay, but all right, if your pastor says that, we should listen. And then they told them, well, pastor said like we shouldn't talk to each other anymore. Not like that, like the way we are. And they disagreed. Okay. They flat out disagreed with me. Said, no, that's not right. So those two students, they came back to me and they said, this is what our parents said. What do we do? What would you guys tell them? I told them, listen.
Put me on life insurance.
Go get life insurance? Is what I said.
No, my phone is just hungry, I'm sorry.
This is what I told them. Hey, you two. You guys know I love you two, right? I see you two as like my son and daughter. You know I'm not trying to get away from the love and, you know all this. They're like, yeah, we know. This is what I think you should do. Listen to what your parents say. Because I knew they were going to listen to their parents anyway. And I don't want to add onto that guilt that they're not listening to me. So what ended up happening was they were waiting 2 years, but they were still meeting, talking, hanging out, doing everything else, just like what a boyfriend, girlfriend would do. Girl went away to college. She met a lot of friends, but she stayed faithful. He's somebody that I'm going to marry. He's my future husband. He finished high school. He waited. High school, he finished. He went to college. 1 month after he got into college, he reached out to her and said, we need to talk. And he said we should break up. You know, when I heard that, I don't know how angry I got. So I was angry at the parents. I was angry that I was right. I didn't want to be right. And then the girl, she came back from break, and she had a hard time. She couldn't come up to me. I was waiting. And finally we met, and how much she cried. I still remember, she just cried, told me how much she wanted to call me and apologize. Like, that you were right, Pastor Dewey. You were just trying to protect me, and I didn't even see it. So you don't have to apologize, come on. And it took a long time for her to heal. That's why, unless you are in a fence of protection called covenant, you shouldn't be getting into any relationship. Okay? It's dangerous. The only person you should be giving your heart to, okay, besides Jesus, of course, is the person you marry. That's it. That other person, they don't deserve your heart, guys and girls. They don't deserve your vulnerability yet until you do it in covenant. Okay, that's God's plan. So now, at this point then, how do we get to know the person? Right? So, okay, we can't cross into that zone of vulnerability. Then how do we even know this is a person we want to marry? How do we do that? Right? Well, we do it openly with accountability. Right? Let me explain what this is. So usually what happens, what I've seen is that when somebody wants to get into a relationship, usually the last one who finds out is either, well, in my case, me. I was always the last one to find out. Because they knew how I felt about this, right? I'm not trying to keep people from happiness, right? They see me as old-fashioned, a lot of strict rules. So I'm usually the last one to find out, or mom and dad are the last ones to find out. I see even cases where, their child would come and say, Dad, the daughter would come, Dad, I think I found somebody that I'm going to marry. This is him. The dad's like, what? How come I've never heard or met this person before? I'm your dad. If that happened to me with my 2 daughters, I would be devastated. What do you mean? Why am I the last one to know? Why would you not have come to me first? Who loves you more than I do? Besides Jesus, Mom. But I'll be so hurt. And already, that boy, he's already he's already in a ditch. Now you're gonna have to work out of this. you remained hidden from me, and this is my daughter that I've been protecting since she's 1 day or whatever, when she was born. Now you're going to take her away from me, and now I'm looking at you like, well, what makes you think that you are worthy of taking my daughter? That's how I would feel. Because I'm giving away my daughter. I'm not going to give away my daughter to anybody. Why would you not have come to me first? Why am I the last one to see who you are? That's why we have to do this openly. See, if we do anything hidden, there's a problem. See, if it's pure and right, then we could be open. We should be open. We should be including our family or our church, people who love us and we trust them. They should all be involved in this process of you making the second most important decision in your life. The first one is your decision to follow Jesus. The second one is who you're going to marry. And in such a big decision, you don't make this by yourself. It should not be hidden. It should be open. So one of the things, it's strange, but, if you're seriously considering, like, this could be somebody, whether it's your mom and dad, in some cases, mom and dad's not available, other family members, pastor, teacher, people that, that really do genuinely care about you. You want them to see, and you want them to tell you what they see, because, when you're kind of like infatuated, you're kind of like in that stage of like, oh, I think he's the one. You have like blind spots. Like you just have like hearts in your eyes, and there's clearly issues, but you don't see it, or you just excuse it away. It's like, no, but you don't know him like I do. Like, what do you mean? Like I see red flags all over here, and you marry and enter into this covenant. Remember, what covenant means is you don't leave, right? Even though we see that happening, right? And it's painful for that to happen, and we don't want people to go through that. Okay? And that's why you want to be open and have people involved, so they can also see. I know already. Like if a boy comes, I'm going to see what kind of person that he is. Wait until that boy shows up. I'm gonna have a talk with him, not to threaten him, but I want to know. I want to know what kind of person he is, things like that. So we have to be open. So one of the things that might seem very foreign in today's society, but it's to let your family meet the person, not later on when it gets serious, but at the beginning. And a lot of times, I think this is where a church comes in, and this is also helpful because a lot of times people in the church, like they develop feelings for each other, and they do get married. So in that case, it's like having family members, and they're involved. They get to meet that person at the beginning, right? And you're being open about this, so that if that person says, "I don't agree," there's something wrong, and if multiple people are telling you no, then you should be taking this seriously. That there is something that you are not seeing. And then also, except for being open, but also about having accountability. Okay, and this again also is to protect us so that we don't cross over into a sexual relationship. Because, like I said, if you're two people who are attracted to each other, you spend a lot of time alone together, one thing leads to another. That's what happens. The Bible tells us to flee from youthful lust. The Bible says flee, run away from it. The Bible doesn't say resist it, but it says run away from it. So if we get into a relationship, we're like, yeah, I'm going to resist this. Right? It's okay, I'm going to be alone with her, but I'm going to resist. Right? And I'm going to talk to her, yeah, we need to resist. And she says, okay, we're going to resist. Is that even possible? So if that's your way of doing it, like we're still spending all this time alone, but we're going to resist, what you're saying is you know better than God. Because what God is saying is you can't do that. You're not capable of doing that, of resisting that kind of temptation. The only way you can stay away from it is you have to run away from it. You should not even create that kind of atmosphere where you are alone. That's why we need that kind of accountability. So that we meet in public places, or maybe you meet with them to get to know that person, you meet with like other friends. But you have to take these precautions. Because what we're doing is we're trying to see if this person is somebody that we want to marry. We're not trying to get into that emotional attachment and the sexual attachment to see if we want to get married to that person. No, that's not how we do it. That's not how God designed it. The only time we enter into that emotional, sexual attachment is when we know this is the person we're going to marry, under that covenant. So then what are we going to look for? Okay, so fine. We're going to be open. We're going to include our family to see if this is a person. And we're always going to do this openly and with accountability. So what am I supposed to look for then? I mean, this is the important part. Like I said, the most important decision I ever made was to follow Jesus. The second most important decision I ever made was to marry my wife. I still thank God, for my wife every day. Like literally, I see her and I'm just, God, I'm so thankful. Like, how did I even meet her? And I tell her that, and she's like, stop, why you keep saying this? I'm like, I just made the best decision. You know that, right? And she's like, did you make the best decision? And she's like, I'm like, great, thank you. It's funny, my son, when he was 5, it was like a dad-son moment. I took him out to eat. We're eating pizza. And it's like, hey, Humble. It's a nickname I gave him, so I call him Humble because I want him to be humble. So ever since he was little, I used to always just call him Humble. His name was Jaden, but so I said, Humble, listen, isn't Mom so caring, so nice? Isn't she so pretty? And my son, he's a mama's boy, right? So he loves Mom. So he's like, yeah. Right? Then this is what he said to me. He's 5 years old. He said, Dad, Abba, you picked a good one. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Here's me. I'm an adult father talking to his 5-year-old son, and he's telling his dad, you made a good choice. And I was like, yeah, I really did. So who you marry, what you want to look for, this is so important. Because literally, this is the second most important decision you will ever make. But before you even get to who you want to marry, there's a question you need to ask first before that. And that question is, why do you want to get married? Okay, did you ever think about that? Why you want to get married? Because if you answer this correctly, if you understand why you want to get married, then who you want to marry, it just falls into place. Because it should be fitting along with the why you want to get married. So why do you want to get married? Anybody? Those of you who are single, why do you want to get married? This is where we interact. And don't be shy. It's okay. Just be honest. Like, I want to hear what's in your heart right now. Like, why? Does anyone want to get married? Only one person. Chris, you too? Chris was like, I guess if everyone else is doing it. Andrew, you too? Okay, so, just, like, Esther, why do you want to get married?
Have family.
Yeah, family. You love kids? Family. Wonderful. Chris, let's hear it. Why do you want to get married?
To raise kids better than I was raised.
Okay. Kids, okay, yeah, we see family. Andrew, what about you?
I guess not like family tree, it's like generations upon generations of like broken families. I want to break that.
You want to drink? Anyone else? Yeah?
Classic romance.
Romance.
Love.
Love. Here we go. Now it's all opening up now. You guys are all giving me like the Christian 101, the holy answers. Now it's like, it's about love, romance. I want flowers. You know, like. Can I tell you something? You know all those K-pop or K-dramas that you guys watch? And like, oh, what a man. This is love. You know that's all fake, right? That's all fantasy. The reality, all right, I'm like throwing cold water on all your dreams. Right? This is what happens. Yeah, it's like that at the beginning. Right? Leading into the marriage, you just can't wait to just, you hang up. No, you hang up. Like, no, you hung up first. Listen, no, like, and then like you don't hang up, and you spend an hour of you hang up. You know, what did you eat today? I ate this. Well, what do you eat today? And you just love spending all this time. You can't wait, to see each other. And you get married, and you have a newlywed stage. And we could always see the newlywed people, even at church, they're all holding hands. Even at a Korean church, they're still holding hands. They're walking to church together, holding hands. You're like, oh, they're newlyweds. They're just so infatuated with each other. The reality is, after 12, 18 months, that begins to wear off. Okay? It doesn't just stay like that. It begins to wear off. So, if the why you wanted to get married is romance, well, after a year and a half, it's not like that anymore. Now what are you going to do? That was why you got into the relationship. That's what you wanted, and then now it's not there. Now what do? Do you leave? No. Remember, this is a covenant. Now you made a decision based on something that is not going to be like that after a year and a half. And that's the unwise decision. If that's the decision going into it, this is why we have to answer this question. And this is why we have to understand this. Because you don't want to make a mistake, not a mistake, but a choice with wrong objectives. Okay. So why? You want to get married. And I think this is Bible's answer of why we should get married. So I only have 2 slides today. So this is the main verse, Matthew 6:33. Let's read it out loud together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. So we know this is the fundamental agenda for followers of Christ. All right, this is how you should be making all your decisions as a Christian, as someone who's a disciple, someone who is following Jesus. That I am going to seek God's kingdom and His righteousness first. That's how I make all my decisions. This is what I live for. And then all the things about, in the context of this verse, how I'm going to live, what I'm going to eat, how I'm going to survive. God's going to take care of that. You put God first in all that you do. So if that's this is the kind of like the lifelong verse of Christianity, follow Jesus, that I'm going to put His kingdom and His righteousness first, then why would not your second most important decision in your life be based on this verse as well? So it's actually very similar to like what Esther said, like she wanted a family. This is why she wanted to get married. But this verse is going a little bit deeper into that. Like, what family? Why family? And it's to have a family that puts God first. Okay, you are saying, I want to get married. This is the biblical Christian perspective. Why I want to get married is I want to have a family that is a Christian family. A family that puts God first. A family that honors God. A family that's going to raise children to fear the Lord. I want a family that God is Lord, and it's about His kingdom and His righteousness first. That's the why of why we want to get married. So then once you have the why of marriage settled, then who are we looking for to get married? Now this becomes a lot easier. What we are looking for. So what we're looking for, there are many things. I'm just going to share 3 things, and we're going to end. First thing, if you want to have a family, the reason why you're getting into this marriage is because you want to have a Christian family. Then the first thing is that you are to marry. Who you are looking for in a spouse has to be a Christian. There's no way you can consider somebody else, somebody who is not a Christian, if that's your purpose of why you're getting married. Because what happens, eventually things happen. Issues arise. I've seen so many families like this, where issues arise. They didn't see it at first because they were infatuated with love. They were in romance. They were blinded by all that. Yeah, I know he doesn't believe, but I know he'll believe later on. How do you know that? Because you marry that person, that person's somehow guaranteed to be a Christian later on. There is no guarantee. Of course, we're praying for that. And because you married into that covenant now you're going to have to wait until that actually does happen. But you never know. That person may very well never accept Christ. You don't know that. There's no place in the Bible that says that, yeah, you could marry a non-Christian, and I will make sure that because of that marriage, I will have him become a Christian. There's no verse like that. There's no guarantee. How do you know that? You don't. You know, let's say you marry somebody. Let's say you're a woman, you marry a guy, and he has everything else, but he's not a Christian. And you're like, no, but this is so important to me that you have to believe. And he says, well, listen, I'll go to church with you every Sunday. He says that because he's still in that newlywed, that stage. And he probably meant it at that time. And then time goes by, and then all of a sudden, he's like, maybe you should just go to church this Sunday. I'm going to stay home. And then time passes by, and then all of a sudden he's like, wait, why do we give offerings to church? Why do we do that? And then one day he's going to say, you go to prayer meetings like every other day. Why don't you stay home with me? And then before you know it, even your faith gets shaken. People who've been so strong and devoted with God, and all of a sudden, that person leads them away. It's really difficult to keep your faith when you're married to somebody who's not a Christian. I've seen a husband who's not a Christian. The wife is a faithful Christian. The non-believing husband became very opposed to the wife going to church. He felt like she was choosing church over him. Church, like choosing God over him. And it made him angry. That's the life she lived every Sunday. Every time she was getting ready to go to church, this is what she had to deal with every week. But that's the choice the woman made. She made that choice to enter into this covenant, to marry that man. And it's been 20 plus years. They're still married, and he is still not a believer. And he gets angry every time she goes to church. And again, I'm not saying it's not possible, okay? Because there are cases when that does happen. I'm not saying it's impossible. But what I am saying is that there is no guarantee. Then on top of that, here's another thing you have to consider. Now we're talking about starting a family, just like some of you have mentioned, and you're going to have kids. So one day, imagine you have a son. He's 6 years old. And then all of a sudden he goes to his dad. Hey, Abba, how come you don't go to church? And then dad says, well, that's not really for me. That's something like for people like your mom, but I don't know. I don't think that's necessary. And your goal is you want to start a Christian family that puts God first, and you want to raise kids who are going to fear the Lord. Now you have your husband, and he's not supportive. And as a 6-year-old boy, right, when you're that little children, little boys like that, they look at dad, and dad's like their hero. Every boy, every son, when they were very little, they looked at dad and they wanted to be just like dad. It may not be like that now. Things have changed, but at that pure, innocent age, everyone wanted to be like dad. Now you have an unbelieving dad saying that to his son. who do you think the son's going to listen to? Is he going to listen to mom? Go to church? You have to go to church? Or is he going to want to stay home with dad? Hopefully he chooses mom and go to church, but the family shouldn't even have to go through all of this. If the whole purpose of why you're getting married is to have a Christian family. So you see, this decision to, who you're going to decide to marry, it's not only going to affect your life, but most of you, when you get married, most of you are going to get married, and when you get married, you're going to have children. It's going to affect your unborn children, this decision, who you marry. You don't even know your son or your daughter, but it's going to affect him and her. So that's what you need to see. Is this person in faith? And I'm not saying the person has to be mature faith, like he's, like the Apostle Paul or anything like that. But that person should be in a certain place, committed to God, committed to following Christ. He is also committed to having a Christian family. That's who you should be looking for. Second thing you should look for. Marry someone of character. Character. Let me talk to all the young women here. What to look for in a man. Character. This is really strange because I've talked to many married couples. Till this day, I've never met a wife that complained about her husband saying, my husband's so ugly. Why is my husband so not good looking? I haven't heard zero. See, when we're looking for a man to marry, he has to be good looking. Like, that's everything. Like good looking, handsome, right? That's what we look for. Strangest thing. I have heard zero complaints later on after they get married. My husband's so ugly. What I have heard complain, he has anger issues. He's lazy. He shouldn't be doing this, but he is. How do I fix this? Those are the complaints of the wives. This is what my husband's like. It's all character issues. And how do you fix that? You can't. You know how hard it is to change someone's character? It's going to take an incredible work of the Holy Spirit to change somebody who is lazy to somebody who is just diligent. That's why you don't know how long that's going to take, and then until that changes, you're going to have to bear it. Because again, you're in a covenant. So if you're going to find somebody you're looking for to get married to, then you should be looking for somebody who is diligent. Somebody who is not lazy. You shouldn't be focused on somebody who's like, is he good looking or not? So I'm telling you, this is one of the biggest complaints. I remember I was at IKEA about a month ago. I was walking. All of a sudden I hear somebody yelling. I turn around, there's this guy. He's just screaming at his wife. In public. He doesn't even care that there's all these people. And what I heard him saying was, I am not going to pay money for a pillow for a sofa pillow. And he's like screaming at her. And I look and there's these little pillows, right? And it was like $3.99 IKEA pillow. And he's screaming at her like, I am not going to buy a pillow for a sofa. And I see her, and she's just, you could see her, like, she's been through this for years. She doesn't even flinch. He's like, there he goes again. It's kind of like that. And then he's just walking away, and he's just, like, grumbling and just so angry. And I see her, and she's just following him on. My heart broke when I saw that. He has anger issues. He has temper problems. And that's what she has to accept and deal with, because that's your choice. The choice you made to marry that man. Top of that, you're going to have kids. That's going to be your children's father. So some good character traits to look for. Ladies, when you want to look for a man. Besides, godly character, of course. It'd be really wonderful if you can find someone with a good sense of humor. Right? Because life is hard. A lot of times we just need to be able to laugh. And that's why comedians, they're so popular. Because people, they're hurting and they're sad. And then somebody just comes and just starts making you laugh. It's medicine. It just lifts you up. And that's really wonderful, having somebody that can actually make you laugh. I talk to my wife like that a lot, because there are times I know how to make her laugh. And I say something and she's like, stop, and I just keep talking and she starts crying and seems like her stomach hurts and everything. We have moments like that. And I think that's important. Looking for somebody who's good with kids, involved with their kids, because again, he's going to be your husband. Here's something very important. Someone with a strong work ethic. Someone who's not lazy. Someone who's responsible. You don't think this is important? You know how important this is? Because in life, things happen. People lose jobs. People get sick. And if you marry somebody who's lazy, who doesn't have a strong work ethic, now that let's say he lost his job, now who's going to have to bear the load for the family? It's going to be you. Because he's probably going to be sitting at home just sad that his life is like this. You're going to marry somebody who's responsible, strong work ethic. You know what? But I am still a husband. I am a father. I'm going to go out, find a job. I'm going to go work. That's so important to have, to look for. I've seen wives like that complain. They're so sad. They're like, he's not doing anything. He's just staying at home. Let me talk to the men here. What to look for in a wife. All the guys. See, the way we're wired, we're very sensitive to our eyes. We're attracted to beauty. All of us. And if that's what you are drawn to, as in that's your decision, why I want to marry her, because she's so beautiful. We're going to throw cold water on your dreams again. She may look like that now. When she's 40 and 50, she doesn't look like that anymore. Okay, you guys are laughing. It's just reality. So if you marry because of beauty, in time, that's not going to be there. So we can't have that as our main reason why we want to marry this person. Because if that's your main reason, that's not going to be there in a few years. So what are you going to look for? The Bible's the same here for guys and girls. You have to find somebody of character, a woman of character. Last chapter in Proverbs, you can read this when you get home. It speaks about a woman marrying a woman, a wife of noble character. And some of the character traits is that this woman fears God, moves in kindness, has compassion, is generous. These are the things that the Bible is saying. If you marry someone like this, you are blessed. Marrying a woman who's good at forgiving is very important too, because you're going to mess up. If you marry someone who's not forgiving, wow, you're going to have a hard time. Bible speaks so highly of marrying a woman of excellent character. Proverbs 12:4. This is the last slide. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown. Right? A husband's greatest blessing is having a wife of noble character. But a wife who does not have noble character, meaning a wife who is disgraceful is like decay in his bones. You know what that means? You marry a woman with bad character, it's similar to slowly dying of illness. That's what the Proverbs is saying. It's like slow death. Proverbs is funny. But people who understand this, they read this like, you're so right. I'm living in slow death. I shouldn't be joking around with this. I'm sorry. But I've seen husbands like this. they really, yeah, it's not only the husband, but the kids, because the wife is. You want to marry a woman who's going to inspire you to grow in God? That's who you want to marry. And lastly, you want to marry someone you're attracted to. That's important too. You don't marry somebody who you're not attracted to. That makes zero sense. You're going to spend the rest of your life married to somebody you are not attracted to whatsoever. God's not going to, that's not even part of God's plan for you either. Because marriage is a sexual relationship. There needs to be attraction. There should be, has to be attraction there. I wanted to just share one thing about the importance of sex. Besides making babies, family and things. You know, the female brain, you guys, all the women here, they have a neurochemical in their brains. 10 times more. This one chemical called oxytocin. Okay? 10 times more of this in women's brains than men. And what this does is that it creates feelings of warmth, affection, bonding, intimacy. So this is why women, they tend to be better at relating with other people emotionally, right? They have more of this chemical. So guys don't have that much of this, but there's a point, only one point in a guy's brain where the level of this oxytocin that gives intimacy, bonding, relational feeling, it reaches that point of a woman. Only one time. And it happens right after sex. And this is God's design. So what happens is when you're married, okay, again, only in the place of marriage, even though, at the beginning they're so infatuated in love with each other, but then again, that wears off. And then when husband and wife, when they have sex, in the guy's brain, this oxytocin floods into his brain, and then he feels emotionally attached to his wife even more. And this is how God created it. That's why it's a blessing, what sex does in marriage. It helps the husband to attach more of himself to his wife. But the problem is, you're not married, and you do this. So for the guys, this oxytocin floods into you, and you're not supposed to be thinking, you should be thinking clearly about who you want to marry. But this floods in, and now it clouds your judgment. Now you want to be attached to this person, even though this person has a temper, has anger issues. There's all these things. Not a Christian. These are all things, all red flags that you know you should not marry. But because of the oxytocin, you're creating a bond. It's like a cement in your brain that you want to attach yourself with her, even though you shouldn't. And even if you know you shouldn't. This is why it's so dangerous for us to have sex outside of marriage. Because what happens now when you break up, let's say you had a sexual relationship, you're dating, and then you break up. Now what you have to do is, God created this oxytocin in you so that you're supposed to bond with your wife, but you've been bonding with your girlfriend, and then now you break up. Now you're trying to tell yourself, it's okay and I have to leave this person, even though in your brain you've attached yourself to that person, like that person's your wife. So I'm not even talking about premarital sex as sin and all that stuff. We know that. I'm talking about this in a practical sense, what God's design is, even for sex. This is why it's so dangerous to have sex outside of marriage. Because that bond that you're creating, that's only for your wife. But when you experience sex in that covenant of marriage, this is one of the greatest blessings between the husband and wife. It really is. So I'm going to wrap things up now. As followers of Christ, talked about dating, marriage, what to look for in your spouse, I said. Because the reason why you're going to get married is because you want to have a Christian family. Then, of course, one, you have to look for a person's faith. Second, you look for character, what kind of character that person has. And then 3, of course, someone you're attracted to. If you find somebody that has all 3, introduce that person to your mom and dad. Introduce that person to your pastor, your teacher, people that you care, who care about you, who love you, so they can see for themselves, that they can give you a clear judgment what they think. One last thing. We talked about what to look for, but you can't be, I'm going to look for that perfect husband. You should be looking at yourself to see if you're going to be that perfect wife. Okay, there's no one perfect. Okay, but you need to also consider yourself. Am I, ready for this? Am I going to be someone who can really take care of my wife? Am I going to be somebody who could be a good husband, or a good wife? You have to also be looking at yourselves. There are things that we need to work with and work through with God so that we can be ready as we're searching. And that's what we're all doing. We should be doing. So I really encourage you, please don't leave out your parents in this decision. Don't wait until you propose to introduce your parents to your wife or your husband. Okay? It's not fair to your parents, and it's really unwise. And if your parents are not available, again, close relatives, teachers, pastors, people who love you, and they want the best for you, introduce them, let them meet them, and see what they think. And if they say no, if you keep hearing people say no, even though you're like, no, but I want to marry this person, and everyone's just telling you no, then you have to really stop and really consider what you are not seeing. And if that's the case, then you have to be able to walk away because it's better for you, even though it's painful, it's better for you to walk away now, because you can't walk away later. So my blessing for all of you is that in time, who knows, maybe in the next 10 years, we're going to hear about, he's married, or she's married, starting a godly family. And then, Pastor, she's so wise. I married such a good woman. And, I'll be so happy. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And marriage is so hard. People who are married, they know it's so hard. But to go through all that hardship with somebody who's also wanting God, and someone who has good character, it's going to be really helpful that way. I'm going to end. If you have any questions, we could take some questions now.
What happens if the wife and husband go to different churches?
What if a wife and husband go to different churches?
There's one person, yeah. Should the wife and husband go to the same church?
Okay. So this is like before marriage, or I'm sorry, like you're talking about after marriage?
Yeah, during marriage.
I think every situation is unique, and there may be reasons for that. But I think in the long run, they should be at the same church. That's what I think. They should both be planted in the same church. Again, husband and wife are one. Okay? And that unity of that oneness of husband and wife, there's a mystery behind that if we honor it, that God honors that as well. And it maybe short term for whatever reasons that may be, that could happen, but long term they should be one church.
And how's the decision made to whose church should they go to?
So I think the decision should be made together. Okay, to me, in my relationship with my wife, biblically the husband is the head, right? But I never just make decisions on my own. I always ask my wife. I want to know what she thinks. Right? And many times she moves in wisdom. I want to know. But any time where we're still not sure, 50-50, she feels this way and I feel this way. She's told me this from the beginning. She says, if that happens, you make the decision. I'll follow you. So in my marriage with her, how many times had I had to overrule her and you follow me? I think like maybe 2 times our whole marriage. Everything else, we talked it over and we decided together. So I think for a husband and wife, they should talk it over and see why this church, and then make a decision together. You know? But ultimately, if that happened with me and my wife, at the end, if we're still 50-50, my wife would tell me to choose, and then she'll follow. Anyone else? Marriage? I guess if I could share one last thing, if there's no other questions. So what happens if you got into a relationship and it became emotionally attached and sexual, and you broke up and you're hurting? Like, what do we do? And doesn't mean God can't heal. Okay, doesn't mean God can't forgive. He does. He brings healing. He would much rather you didn't go through all of that, right? Because it takes something away. Like it's hard. But we go before God with that. We ask God to forgive. I made poor choices. And God helps us and He heals us. Then you search for that person. There is no perfect person, okay? But you search. If you made a mistake, it doesn't mean it's like it's over with or anything like that. Okay. I think that's it. Okay, so how about I just pray for you guys? I'll just bless you, all right? And then we can just kind of hang around here and chat. God, I thank you. Thank you so much for teaching us what it means to be in a relationship and how important this decision is. God, I pray that you will guide all the young people here to make wise decisions with their lives, who they are going to choose to get married to, and what to look for, even like why we want to get married, for that very reason. God, I pray that Matthew 6:33 will be just planted in their hearts. May that decision, may that verse be the way they make decisions and all the decisions they make. Which job should I pick? Well, which job am I going to be able to put God first? What should I do with my life for the next year? Well, what am I going to be able to do? Put God's kingdom first. Even with marriage, who I should pick, choose. Putting God first and His righteousness first. I pray that that will be how we choose and that we will be wise in our decision making. God, I pray that all the young people here, they will find themselves in years to come married to really good husband and wife. That we also will be a good husband and wife because of you, your help. So please mold us, help us. Help us to prepare as we search. In Jesus' name I pray.